Okay, before lecture chat. Yeah, so as Chris said last week, I spoke about, sort of the beginning of my practice and at the Rochester Zen Center in Rochester, New York, and talked about working on koans and getting to the introductory koans and subsequent koans, and particularly brought forth an introductory koan saying that is, the pith of it is, go straight through a narrow mountain pass of 49 curves. How do you do that? And I also say, for me, it's walk straight on the crooked path. And so I'll continue to walk straight on the crooked path here with you. So there I was at the Rochester Zen Center. And I had at that point met and married a man that I had met there and was working on the koans. Well, he has always been, continues to be totally devoted to the Dharma and full of big ideas, and had the idea that we would take a round the world pilgrimage, starting in India and tracing the path of how Buddhism came through India, Tibet, and China, Japan, Korea, the whole way. And he'd not only done that, but he had gotten letters of introduction written to monasteries all over the world, and had letters of introduction to go to many places. So I was working on koans and kind of thought that it would be nice to sort of continue that and complete that part, but he wanted to go on, so we that's what we did. And so we started out, and first stop was Paris, France. And this was because Thich Nhat Hanh was living there at the time. Nhat Hanh, well, many of you, I'm sure, have read his books and practiced in his lineage. But just to talk about him a little bit, and also, Chris spoke of last week about how the koans were formed during 8th century China, in a time that was very turbulent and war and a lot of chaos going on and that the koans came out of this need to engage more in the world and interact in the world. And Nhat Hanh, the Vietnam War lasted for 20 years. First France fought there, and then we got in and fought there. The US did. And Nhat Hanh grew up during this time. He became a monk at 19 in the Unified Buddhist Church of Vietnam, the established religion, Buddhist church in Vietnam. And he wrote, from this is a book that was published in 96. Okay, so fairly late. He was exiled from Vietnam in 66 during the war. But anyway, he wrote about, in the sort of the beginning of this book, he says, I grew up in a time of war. There was destruction all around, children, adults, values, a whole country. As a young person, I suffered a lot. Once the door of awareness is open, you cannot close it. The wounds of war in me are all not healed. I'll read that again. The wounds of war in me are still not all healed. There are nights I lay awake and embrace my people, my country, the whole planet with my mindful breathing, So that's what he came out of. And he developed something called the School of Youth for Social Service. And this was a nonviolent organization that really, in the midst of the war, did not take sides with either South Vietnam or North Vietnam. And they they acted with nonviolent disobedience and also to protect people. So they would form human corridors. They'd wear white and carry white flags and form human corridors in war areas to allow villagers and townspeople to escape. And then also he wrote about a nonviolent action of, I haven't seen this personally, but he said that in Vietnam, family altars were made of heavy stone, that you had a heavy, substantial altar. So they would drag these altars out into the street to barricade the street to prevent the tanks from moving freely through the towns. And so he really coined the term engaged Buddhism, and really created, he really created his own sect. I mean, the Order of Interbeing, Tiepian, the Order of Interbeing, was created at that time, and it was about really, he rewrote the precepts and he added 4. I mean, chutzpah, it's a Yiddish term for that. And I'm just going to read you a couple of precepts, because the precepts are about, they take the basic precepts, but then they also expand them to include this social engagement, or a further view of taking in the whole of the world. So I'm just going to read a couple of them. And they were called mindfulness trainings. They're called mindfulness trainings, really, rather than precepts. Aware of the suffering created by fanaticism and intolerance, we are determined not to be idolatrous about or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology, even Buddhist ones. Buddhist teachings are guiding means to help us learn to look deeply and to develop our understanding and compassion. They are not doctrines to fight, kill, or die for. Another one, he says, aware of the suffering brought about when we impose our views on others, we are committed not to force others, even our children, by any means whatsoever, such as authority, threat, money, propaganda, or indoctrination, to adopt our views. We will respect the rights of others to be different and to choose what to believe and how to decide. We will, however, help others renounce fanaticism and narrowness through compassionate dialogue. So these are the precepts. Here's a beautiful one. Aware that looking deeply at the nature of suffering can help us develop compassion and find ways out of suffering. We are determined not to avoid or close our eyes before suffering. We are committed to finding ways, including personal contact, images, and sound, to be with those who suffer, so that we can understand their situation deeply and help them transform their suffering into compassion, peace, and joy. It was just the end of the war at the time that I met him, and it was kind of like what we've just experienced in Afghanistan. Boat people trying to leave Vietnam, people not knowing what had happened. The war was over. There was, many, I'm sure most of you remember this. And so they were very, very sad, losing friends, and it was a difficult time. But that meeting, created a relationship for us that lasted many, many years. After Paris, we went to India and to Dharamsala, which is where the Dalai Lama has his residence in exile in northern India. And there weren't that many Westerners studying there at the time, and we were fortunate enough to have an audience with him. And he, when he found out that we were Zen students, I guess what he had heard about Zen was, sudden enlightenment and Kensho and coming to full enlightenment in one lifetime. A lot of that language was really common in that period. And so he right away said, well, you just can't jump to enlightenment. It takes lifetimes. It's endless. You have to be patient and gentle with yourself. And he said, even myself, I noticed that in the last few weeks, I'm better at managing my anger than I was before. And I just about fell over. I mean, the Dalai Lama holds the place of 14 consecutive lifetimes of embodying the emanation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. So he's the 14th uninterrupted consecutive embodiment of the Bodhisattva of compassion. And he's telling me that he's doing a little better with his anger this week. and then, thinking about it, well, he had a lot to be angry about. I mean, he was in exile. He'd had to escape his country in the middle of the night on horseback. Monasteries were being burned down. Monks were being imprisoned and tortured. He'd lost everything. And there are some kind of wonderfully heartbreaking stories about monks that were sent to re-education camps or imprisoned. And then when they were either escaped or released, would come and tell what happened. And one monk said that he was in a forced labor camp. It was freezing, very little food, very little clothing, no shoes, no gloves. They were made to make bricks out of frozen dirt or something like that. And he said that he did his best to make the bricks, the very best bricks he could possibly make, because he knew that someone was going to use these bricks and maybe build their house with these bricks, and that he wanted them to have the very best bricks. And then they further asked him, and he said, well, but that wasn't even the worst. And they said, what could possibly, what was so worst? And he said, there were times that I almost lost my compassion for the Chinese. So we found, after having been at the Rochester Zen Center in this very kind of strict, mind only, get the answer Zen practice that we were involved in, the Tibetans were just so it was lovely, just very relaxed and happy, and the compassionate attitude, and we also saw how the lamas had a function within society, that to do prayers and do ceremonies, and also they have a divination where they take their mala and have a way of divining. And so we found that the lamas would do ceremonies and speak on the nature of mind and do these high teachings with the same solemnity and the same heart that they would go and bless someone's new motorcycle, or tell somebody where they should go for to do the best sweater business, to sell their sweaters in Delhi. It was just so sweet. It was just so sweet. And So we wandered around. We went in India. We traveled into, visited various places, and eventually found a teacher. Our teacher, Zona Rinpoche, was in the Payul. He's in the Nyingmapa lineage, Payul Gompa, and in the Tibetan tradition, what we study of mind training and all is really considered almost secret teaching. You don't talk about this until someone has done a lot of preliminary practice, a lot of mantras, a lot of recitation, has really developed their faith. And so we started out doing the preliminary practices, and the preliminary practices are 500,000, and it's 100,000 full-length prostrations. You've seen the Tibet all the way out where you're laying on the ground. 100,000 full-length prostrations. And while you're doing that, you're saying, the refuges, I take my refuge in the Lama, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha for the sake of all beings. And you say that 100,000 times while you're doing a visualization. And then there's purification practice, which is Vajrasattva. Here's Vajrasattva. Here's Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva is the image for that is you visualize white light emanating down from Vajrasattva and filling your whole being, and purification happening through the, I'm getting distracted. All one's obscurations and karmic hindrances and all these things coming out as you do this visualization. So that's the purification. And then there's a generosity one, which is a mandala offering. And this is you imagining offering yourself, your body, your clothing, your wealth, your family, everything you have to the Dharma, to everyone. You give everything away. And it's a ritualized practice of generosity. And then the final one is guru worship, where you're doing a mantra to Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism to Tibet and stands as your teacher and the Buddha. And so that is another visualization. So we did that. And during this time, while I'm going all around in pilgrimage places and having all these amazing experiences, I'm crying every day. It was really difficult. It was lonely, isolated. We were, I hadn't lived with my family or my mother in years, and somehow now I missed her. And I was, 22 or 23. We had just gotten married. This was our honeymoon trip. We were living in monasteries, so we were always in different rooms. There was no intimacy. And it was very difficult for me. So this is kind of my theme of the straight on the crooked path. It's like, how can it be this and this at the same time? How can it be amazing and incredibly difficult at the same time? Just a short story of Rinpoche. I love it. I was having really struggles, so they decided we should do a ceremony, the Chö ceremony, and we went out way into the mountains by a stream and waterfalls, and we were out and did a ceremony with the way they do it, with incense and candles and flowers and the whole deal. And it's a beautiful blue sky, pure blue sky. And the ceremony takes a while. And then as we're clearing up, I noticed that there's this kind of black rain cloud, just one, like a small black rain cloud. And as we're getting ready to go, packing up, it comes right overhead and hails on us, hail. And we're, I'm like, well, what in the world is, what is this hail? And Rinpoche says, doesn't bat an eye, he says, oh no, this is not hail. No, this is the devas blessing us, thanking us for having done this ceremony. They're offering flowers. They're raining flowers on us. And I was like, perception and what we perceive and what we see and how do we see it? I mean, I think that Rinpoche was probably living in a different realm most of the time. His perception of what was going on in the world was just completely different. It really just kind of blew the doors off of thinking that we know much of anything, really, So, so he told us that to go on pilgrimage, when you go to holy places, you take incense and candles and offerings and offer and imagine what happened there at the time that it happened. So we go to Vulture Peak, which is where the Buddha, I can't remember exactly what sermons he gave or what, I should be knowing this, but anyway. And we go and you kind of go on this Indian bus, bouncing down the road, and it's hot and dry and dusty. And you get there and it's sort of a hill, and it goes back up in the hills and get up to the top, and there's kind of bricks falling down from a few bricks and stones and things from what maybe once was a temple or something, but not much. There's a little guest house. There's not much going on. It's not very inspiring at all. But we take out the incense and the altar and the things and give and I visualize what had happened there and do my best. And all of a sudden I see in the sky like a rainbow of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and everything. And I feel just embraced by this thing. And it was an incredible experience. And then that's over and we go down, we get back on the bus, and I'm bumping down the road and it's hot and it's dusty and I feel miserable and I'm crying. What in the world? It was so difficult. So difficult. And as that kind of went on, I just came to the conclusion that I really couldn't be a full-time Dharma practitioner. I just couldn't 24/7, we were doing a couple thousand prostrations a day or some insanity. And so we eventually came back home. I got into nursing school. I think he went back for another kind of few more countries on the pilgrimage plan. And I felt like I'd failed as a Dharma practitioner pretty much. In the sense of not being able to go that full time. So we had children, and that was when we ended up having twins unexpectedly, boy and girl twins, which is the very best day of my life, continues to be. I tell them all the time. After a while, I just kept feeling constrained by the way we were practicing Dharma, by the way that we interpreted I felt constrained by rules. I didn't feel a sense of freedom. And I ended up leaving the marriage. I did it in a very cowardly way. I had a an affair, caused all kinds of suffering. It was a very, very difficult time. And then subsequently remarried. And during that time, I didn't sit a lot. I always had an altar and candles and incense, and would just light an incense in the end of the day and have some moments. And this is where I think I said last week, the Dharma carries us, because throughout this period of investigating kind of what is spirituality and freedom, or what is being a spiritual person in this world now. And I don't know, I think I might have spent too many lifetimes burned at the stake for being a heretic, or in a cloister, behind the walls, hearing everybody else dance and sing. But this time I was like, no, I'm going to be the one dancing and singing. I couldn't be in that kind of restraint. So during this time, I studied, shamanism as a nurse, integrative therapies, energy healing, a lot of things that open to a greater awareness, a greater expansion. But I also think they never really got to the point of realizing our oneness, or realizing the empty nature of self. They don't go as far as that. And so the Dharma carries us in the sense that gradually kind of understanding evolves, it seems like. Evolves in spite of myself, really, in spite of myself, I would say. And so by the let's see where I am here. Oh yeah. Yeah, I would have amazing experiences and then go just do really stupid things. Get involved. A dramatic example was getting involved with somebody who turned out to be a sociopath, accosted my grown son with a machete. I was embarrassed in front of my entire family. My family is very angry with me. I held on to this as like a new way to feel guilty for years, at the same time of having experiences where my foot and the floorboards are the same. There's no Erika anywhere, so how is this possible? In any case, again, all my ancient twisted karma, greed, anger, and ignorance, body, speech, and mind, another, blind alley, twisted curve, straight down the crooked path. It goes. So about 2002, I moved back to San Francisco Bay Area, which is my home. My mother is getting older, and I moved back. And there's so much Dharma available in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I did find Norman, went to a talk by Norman Fisher, and then went to a session with him. I think Chris was the Shuso for that session. It was in Dorothy's Rest in the Redwoods. And I can only remember that after the first evening coming out, and this is my first time back in a Zen retreat in years and years. And, so I'm like eyes down, no moving, no talking, right? And booming out of what seems like out of the redwoods, I hear, "Welcome." I'm like, what? someone speaking during sesshin, unbelievable. So it turned out it was Norman saying hello and welcome and how are you? And then I went to Dokuzan, and rather than ding, 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 did you get the message? Nope, you're out. It was, oh, what would you like to talk about today? It was so sweet, so sweet. And Chris gives her Shuso talk, and she's so excited about ringing the wake-up bell that she shakes it so hard that the bell comes in half, actually. And I just had the same deja vu experience I felt meeting Suzuki Roshi. I felt, meeting Norman and Chris, and coming out at the end of the sesshin and seeing Chris there and seeing, oh, there's my Dharma sister, I said. There she is. And yeah. So then I called up my kids and said I'd found my Sangha. So thank you. Writing this has been really, I've learned a lot. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope that it was interesting to you, because it was very, very helpful to me. Thank you.